Hello and welcome back to We Talk Talent, our highly popular interview series where we uncover stories, strategies, and solutions driving the future of talent, HR innovations, and leadership. I'm Abhik Roy, Associate Content and Community from ETHRWorld, and it's my pleasure to introduce the guest of our today's episode, Beth O'Callahan, Chief Administrative Officer from NetApp.
Hi, Abek. I'm so delighted to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm equally delighted, and I'm very excited for all the questions that I've created for you. I'm gonna start with the first one. Employee expectations have evolved tremendously in recent years. With pandemic, there's been a greater need for flexibility, autonomy. There's more spotlight on employee well-being. So many changes are happening globally. What significant changes are you seeing, in what people expect from their employers now, and how is NetApp responding to it?
So it's a great question. And frankly, you hit on the ones that are top of mind for me, right? First is flexibility. We find that this is so important on a number of fronts, particularly as we try to build and continue to build an inclusive workforce centered around belonging. The more flexibility we can provide employees, we find the more and diverse talent that we can attract. And so the way that we have positioned ourselves, which we believe to be a strategic advantage, is by allowing, making sure we can continue to build our culture, which is a very collaborative, inclusive, team-oriented culture, but do that in a way that doesn't require people to be in the office every single day of the week. So we've really gone to a 2-day a week ask of employees, which we call Thrive Together. These are opportunities for us to come together with intention and spend time together, real meaningful one-on-one or group interactions, and allow employees the rest of the week to do their kind of task-oriented individual work that they might need to do. Obviously, employees that are more customer-facing may have different needs, and they may be spending those times in customers and partner meetings. But still, we find that this flexibility has been very conducive to actually welcoming new employees on board and retaining the great talent that we already have. So that would be one strategy. The other that you mentioned that really came out of the pandemic is really focused on kind of employee well-being. And that's, I think, is not just kind of health and physical and mental health. But I think it's also just creating kind of a safe space for employees at the workplace. So we consider psychological safety for employees to be incredibly important. Obviously, we all spend so much time at work that it's important for that space to be safe, for people to be heard and to be welcoming. That helps, I think, with overall employee well-being. In addition to that, we actually have been very intentional. We can't tell people to take care of themselves necessarily. We want them, and we encourage them, and we want to make sure that managers are having those important conversations with employees. But we make sure that we actually set aside specific days globally that we call wellness days. And those, we encourage employees to spend that time on themselves as they see fit, rather than do anything prescriptive or invasive. And so that is another popular benefit that we provide our employees. So those are just two examples of kind of how we're tackling those very complex challenges facing employers.
Yeah, wonderful. So, obviously there are a lot of expectations. It's very clear from your response that so many things that, employees expecting, and, HR has to be on the forefront to, deal with them. Additionally, HR has to take, right now is doing so much more, and they're all doing all at once. There's compliance, sustainability, you talked about psychological safety that leads to innovation, the culture where they, feel safe to, experiment. And then there's the culture itself. So, there's so many things that HR has to deal with right now. And, your role, as Chief Administrative Officer seems to capture that evolution quite well. You're handling legal, handling HR, you're handling, sustainability, so many things together. What led NetApp to, create this role? And what is it helping NetApp to achieve?
Yeah, so thank you. It's a great question. And it is something that I partnered with our CEO and really thinking through What the structure, does it make sense for NetApp? And I would say it doesn't necessarily make sense for every company. It depends probably as much on the organization, where it is in its journey, and also on kind of suitability for the role. I think that we saw an opportunity to actually really leverage the many intersects that legal, sustainability, workplace experience have with HR. And what we are finding is really, as we look to kind of reduce barriers to execution, right? Trying to speed up the business. I like to look at it as how can enablement functions, or traditionally what they would call back office functions, actually be accelerating functions. And I think if you combine the forces of these different groups that are really here to support and propel the business, if you combine them together, it really becomes an amplifying force. And it is also what we often find in organizations, large and small, is that information and activities can become siloed. And when you have silos of activity or information, it actually creates those barriers and slows things down. And you wind up kind of having to redo or repivot. This way, we actually have a forum and an opportunity for cross-functional collaboration kind of built in the Chief Administrative Office overall organization. And so we're collaborating, have teams collaborating without having to kind of go up to their leader, come back down, go back up to another leader, having one leader across all of the functions and a team that is coordinated, that is collegial, collaborative, really helps drive faster and better results for the business.
Great. And you're talking about breaking silos, and right now, very soon, those silos are going to be broken down in terms of humans and AI. Very soon, there's going to be a workflows that's going to be very blended. Humans and AI coexisting.
Right.
And I want to know from you, how you're creating that kind of next era workforce in NetApp. Where humans are able to collaborate effectively with AI as co-workers. Where they can coexist quite well. So how are you doing that, and what has been the outcome so far?
So I think the first thing that we've done that has, I think, helped kind of create, first of all, we want to create, I'm going to go back to that term, psychological safety for employees, because when, the media came out with all the things about AI, people started getting nervous. This is going to take my job. This is going to change my job. There are all these things that really created the feeling of fear versus what we see as really opportunity. AI is never going to replace humans and what they contribute to the workforce, but it will change. It's going to change. And so what we've tried to do is really make sure that employees feel comfortable using AI, getting familiar with its capabilities and its limitations, making sure that our utilization of AI is really grounded in our values, that we are using it ethically, responsibly, transparently, right? And I'm talking about internally. I won't even go into the amazing things our product team are doing to help enable AI. That's for another podcast. But really talking about how we got employees kind of comfortable. And what this has resulted in is we recently did an employee survey, and the sentiment around AI was one of the highest and most positive results, because people are feeling safe to experiment. They're feeling curious about it. They see it as an opportunity. And so the next level of that is really what you talked about, is making sure they're comfortable as that bot, as their coworker, right? And really seeing it as an extension of the workforce. And there's a number of different places we see actually really early adoption, and certainly in the talent acquisition space, where you can actually have an agent that is your recruiter. And so really making sure, wanting to make sure that employees see this as an augmentation of the workforce and not a replacement, really making their jobs and their lives better. And an agent can work around the clock, so you don't have to.
That's a great insight. And you're talking about AI in recruitment, and as one of the ways you're leveraging AI in HR. And that's my next question. We were just talking about the impact of AI on the nature of workforce, but HR itself is getting impacted by AI. HR is increasingly becoming AI driven. So I want to know how NetApp is, leveraging AI in HR and making it much more, digitized, much more intelligent, efficient. How are you doing that? And what impact has it had on the productivity? So to know that AI does make an impact.
Yeah, well, and I'm sure you know this better than I do, but I think the knowledge workers in India are using AI at a much higher rate than the rest of the world. And that's a great example. We want to be in that same space as the Indian workforce, that we are using that and making sure our knowledge workers and all of our workers are leveraging AI as best and as the best and the brightest, and really be leaders in this field. So that's why we've really taken a very intentional approach to using AI, what we call AI for internal operations, from both a ground up and a top down. So we have the right governance in place to make sure that it's being used legally, ethically, in accordance with our policies, and that we're seeing the high return, really measuring, making sure we have measurable productivity gains on any kind of AI initiative that we adopt internally. So having the right structure and KPIs in place to make sure we're seeing gains, and actually prioritizing those highest and best use cases, to make sure the investment, which it does require, is really maximum, the impact is maximized for the organization.
Great. And my one last question for you, Beth. When we are discussing about all these changes, one thing that is getting under direct threat, and as we discussed earlier, also employee well-being. Employees have to deal with so many changes. There's so much stress. There's fear of AI. Then there's so many more other things happening right now. Um, what is that one lesson that you have learned, when approaching employee well-being? Because many organizations are, realizing that employee well-being is the, number one priority, and yet very, very few are able to get it right. What's your lesson, and or what you have learned, while approaching employee well-being meaningfully, how it can be done much in a more effective, better way?
So, I think this goes back to really, and I think we learned a lot of lessons in the pandemic. I do think it goes back to making sure there is that psychological safety within the workplace, and making sure that the employee-employer relationship and the manager-employee relationship is strong and trusted. That way, employees feel comfortable coming forward with concerns, with it, whatever they may be. I think that is really what our learning has been, and making sure the relationships are forged between the employee and manager, so that those conversations can happen and people can look out for each other. That's one of the hallmarks that we really look at our culture, is really that collaboration, teamwork, and really caring for each other is so important to making sure employees are taken care of, and feel that they can do their best work at NetApp.
Yeah, that's a great lesson. Thank you for sharing that, Beth. And we have come to the end of our interview. Thank you so much, for joining me on We Talk Talent. I have learned so much from you. It's been so nice to meet you. Thank you for joining We Talk Talent.
Thank you so much for your thoughtful questions. It was my honor.
Oh, equally my honor. And to our viewers, make sure you stay tuned for our next episode where we will continue to explore more trends and more transformative ideas shaping the future of work. Until next time, thank you and take care.